But I believe Aang can save the world.
Alright, hey guys, what's going on? This is Space here, and welcome to a new little series we're going to be doing. So I've been doing this Let's Talk About series for two things now. We did it for the MCU, and we also did it for Star Wars. I wanted to do it for a few more things, including Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Avatar in general, not the blue people. We're talking about like the TV show and stuff, yeah. So, Avatar is one of my favorite series. Actually, I'd probably say it is my favorite series. I just love it so much. And I've been rewatching it like a madman. I've already gotten through the entire series of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm on Korra right now. I'm on Korra Book 2. When this comes out, I might actually be on like Book 3 maybe even, because I've been watching them a lot. And yeah, just blazing through it. So it's been a lot of fun. Brings back a lot of memories, you know. So I first started watching this series pretty much back when it started. I don't remember the first episode that I saw, but I think I started pretty early on. I don't think I saw the first episode like when it was premiered. I don't remember though. But yeah, such a great series. Really has so many just great characters and stories and episodes. And even the episodes that I think aren't as good as some of the other ones are still really good. So yes. So in this series, this little series we'll be going through each of the books in one video. Each video will be a separate talking of each book. So today we're going to be starting off with book 1, which is Water. And then we'll be moving on to Earth and Fire. And then we'll be talking about Korra, which of course is Air, Spirits, Change, and Balance. And then we'll also be talking about The Last Airbender movie. Yes, we'll be talking about that. It's probably pretty soon, too, because I'm going to rewatch it today. For me, it's Thursday. Last week, Thursday, not yesterday. But for you guys, of course, it's Friday, unless you're watching this in the future or whenever, you know. Anyways. So, alright. Let's begin. Like I said before, we're going to be going through each episode. There are 20 episodes in the first season, not including this, like, pilot episode, which is called Avatar: The Last Airbender. So, we won't be talking about that, but, well, you know, let's just go over it a little briefly. You know, it's pretty much just Boy in the Iceberg, you know. Zuko wants to capture Aang, Sokka, and his sister, who is named Kaya instead of Katara. And Kaya, of course, the name comes up later in the series. But, yeah, must help Aang find masters and stuff so he can train to become a fully realized avatar. So, alright, so here we go. And we're starting off with the first episode, of course, which is The Boy in the Iceberg. Now, the basic story of this one is that Katara and Sokka are brother and sister, of course, and they are off on a little fishing journey, and then Katara gets mad at Sokka, and she waterbends, and it breaks the ice, and it reveals that there is this kid in the ice, yes, and they free him from the ice, and it turns out he is an air nomad, and the air nomads haven't been around since before the 100 Years' War. You find out later, of course, that Sozin destroys the Airbenders, the Airbender nations, all 4 of the temples during Sozin's comments the first time to start off the war because, of course, Avatar Roku dies and Aang is born as the next Avatar, so he goes, instead of hunting down who it is, he just destroys the entire place. But we'll get into that a little more later. So, by the way, just in case you couldn't tell, this thing has full spoilers, man. So if you haven't seen this series, what the heck are you doing? Just watch it, alright? Anyways, so this episode's pretty nice. You get to meet Aang, you get to be introduced to Sokka and Katara. This is one of the few episodes where you get to see Grand Grand. Grand Grand only appears, I think, twice in the whole series. This episode and then the next episode after it, because this episode is a two-parter. Aang goes to the Southern Water Tribe village, which is kind of run by Sokka because all of the other men are off doing their thing in the war, helping the Earth Kingdom fight the Fire Nation, because that's where the Fire Nation is mainly focusing their attack, is on the Earth Kingdom. And then we're introduced to our first villain of the series, which of course is Zuko. Zuko is hunting the Avatar, and he's looking around. He's gone all over the world, and now he is in the Southern Water Tribe area, and his uncle is with him too. And, you know, his uncle is great. He's so wise and very strong bender too, which you find out later as well. And, you know, they're just looking for him. And then eventually they see a burst of lights, and then I think like a signal, a flare is shot up because Katara and Aang, Aang is introduced to the village, of course, like I said before, and then they go and they find this, Katara shows them around, and they also go penguin sweating, of course, and then eventually they uncover this old Fire Nation ship, which we'll talk about in a little bit too in another episode. But they go exploring in it, and then eventually it sends off a flare, and Zuko is alerted to their presence. And then I believe that's where the episode ends. And then the second episode, the Avatar returns, a very awesome episode. If the first one is really good, but this one I think is even better. The second part, Zuko goes to the village after seeing the flare. Aang is told off by just Sokka. He's told to leave the camp and go because he caused the trouble. He caused the Fire Nation to come to their area, and Sokka sees, of course, like the black smoke, like ash, falling from the sky. So he knows the Fire Nation is coming. So he tells Aang to go because he's already caused enough trouble. And then Zuko comes and Aang saves the day, but then he gives himself up to Zuko. Zuko captures him, and then he's thrown into their ship. And then eventually he escapes, and he goes into the Avatar state for the first time, and Katara and Sokka realize that he is indeed the Avatar. He's not just some random air nomad guy, he's actually the Avatar. So yes, I also forgot to mention, of course, we get to introduce to Appa as well. I almost said Momo, that's not yet, but we get introduced to Appa, who of course is Aang's Sky Bison. He's an awesome character too. And yes, so the first two episodes are amazing. I really like them. It's a very good start to the series. You get an idea of what exactly the power Aang holds, even though, he's just like a little goofy kid, but he's actually has something more to him, like he is the Avatar. You also get introduced to the villain as well, of course, Zuko. You understand what he's doing. He's trying to capture Aang and to restore his honor because he was banished from the Fire Nation. You don't find out exactly the specifics later until another episode, which is very spicy. And of course, you get introduced to the two characters that help Aang on his journey. And yeah, it just sort of like pushes the story forward. You get an idea of what they have to do. They have to go learn waterbending first, then earth, then fire. Their first goal, of course, is to go to the Northern Water Tribe to learn waterbending for Katara and Aang as well. On their way, though, they do make a few side trips, and Aang gets to see how the world has changed in the 100 years that he's been in ice, as well as you get a sense of the world that it takes place in. It's a lot of world building and stuff. It's really well done. Alright, so the next episode is the Southern Air Temple, a very emotional episode, and really, really just a great episode, too. Like, all these episodes are pretty darn good. Most of them are even great, I'd say. But, okay, so this one, they go to the Southern Air Temple. Aang wants to see if anyone is still around his air temple. It's been so long that he doesn't know about the war. Well, he knows about the war exactly, but he doesn't know what happened to the air nomads. So he goes there, and he hopes to see some people, but he finds it abandoned. Katara and Aang and Sokka, just explore around, Sokka and Katara find out the truth first, that all of the Fire Nation was there, but Katara wants to hide it from Aang until eventually he does find out. But he also unlocks this door, which Monkey Yatsu said would there's a person there that would help him in the future when he was an Avatar. So he does that. He unlocks the door, and it turns out it's just a room of statues. And the statues aren't just any old ordinary statue. They're actually the previous avatars, which I thought was really cool. So you get to see like all of the avatars there. There's like so many of them. Like there's just so many unnamed avatars too, which is interesting. So there's a lot of space, if they ever wanted to make some more like prequel stuff, which would be cool. But Aang sees Roku, a statue of Roku, the avatar before him, and he just knows him, like instantly recognizes him, which I thought was interesting. This sort of sets the path to Aang meeting Roku eventually, pretty soon actually, in the next few episodes. And then he also, eventually, he finds Monkey Yatsu's body. He figures out what happened, that the Fire Nation came and destroyed the Air Temple and killed all of the people. And naturally that causes Aang to go into the Avatar state, and Katara eventually settles him down. And yes, he does find Momo in this episode too, so it's not all doom and gloom, This is a pretty dark episode, because it just all the stuff that happens in the Southern Air Temple. You find out what the Fire Nation did. And yes, this is a great episode, one of the best early on. I'd say it's probably even better than the first two, even. Like, it's just so good. Next up, we have the Warriors of Kyoshi, another one of my favorites. I just love all these episodes, but this one especially. I really like the Kyoshi Warriors. It's very cool. And Suki is a very good character. It's another character that is introduced early on that does get to time later, which is great. So, in this one, Aang wants to ride the Unagi, which is this giant serpent thing, and eventually they get captured by the Warriors of Kyoshi because they think they're trespassing or there might be enemies like Fire Nation, but then they find out that it's just the Avatar and his friends. So the people of Kyoshi Island just absolutely love the Avatar. The island was created by Kyoshi, the Avatar, before Roku, and they just love the Avatar, so they treat Aang very well, and it really starts to go to his head. But eventually, he figures it out. It's kind of a nice piece to his arc, like kind of a humbling moment for him. And Sokka also learns that women can also fight too. So, and he learns some moves from the Kyoshi warriors. And yes, it's a pretty funny moment, seeing Sokka all dressed up like a Kyoshi warrior too. But very cool too. I like that they did that. And yes, overall, a pretty good episode. I don't think it's as good as the Southern Air Temple or the first 2 episodes, but it's still a very good episode. It introduces the Kyoshi warriors, as well as gives us a little idea of who Kyoshi was herself. Not really too much, but you get to find out more about her later in the series, which is great. I am a big fan of Kyoshi. I think she's a cool avatar. Next up, we have the King of Omashu, a very awesome episode. I almost said movie. This is not a movie, but it would be cool if it was a movie. In this episode, they go to the Earth city of Omashu to ride the mail delivery system, and eventually they get arrested. The mail delivery system, by the way, is so cool. It's just like this long series of ramps that's uses gravity as well as earthbending to send mail throughout the city. It's very cool. They ride it. Of course, they get arrested, and then the king notices Aang, and he recognizes him, because it turns out in the end that, well, I'll save it for a sec. So, he goes through 3 challenges. One of them is pretty simple. He just has to say what he thinks of Bumi's dress, his getup. The second task is to get the lunch key for his lunchbox, which is in like a waterfall and stuff. It's very dangerous. And then the third task is to get his pet Flopsy, which at first he thinks is like, I don't remember exactly what it was, exactly like a rabbit or something. And then it turns out it's just like this giant creature. I don't know what it is exactly, but Flopsy, yeah. So, and then lastly, he has to fight. Choose a warrior to fight. So you have this one guy that's like this like super awesome mercenary, and this other guy that's like a really bad apple guy, and then you have King Bumi. He chooses King Bumi, and then of course he chooses wrong because King Bumi is actually like a really buff guy that's a very, very good earthbender. And yes. So, and then in the end, the last task he has to do is to tell who he is. Tell the King of Omashu who he is, like what is his name. So the reason Aang did this is because Katara and Sokka have these growing crystals, creeping crystals on their fingers, and eventually they keep on growing, and if they grow too much, they won't be able to breathe, so Aang has to complete the tasks in a certain amount of time before that happens, and the Earth King will release him. Not the Earth King, but like the King of Omashu, Just, there's a difference there. But, so Aang eventually figures out that the person that he is, the Earth King is, the King of Omashu is his old friend Bumi. And it's such a great moment to see that Aang does have a friend that's still alive after 100 years, yes. So that episode is pretty fun. You get introduced to King Bumi, who is a very fun person. He's a very wacky character, but he's still a great character. You get to see him more in the future, too. He doesn't make any appearances in the rest of Book 1, but he does make appearance in Book 2, as well as Book 3, so that's great. Alright, so next we have Imprisoned. So this is, they go to an Earth Kingdom, and this guy, Haru, they meet this local boy there, and he, they kind of get to know him, and eventually, they find out he's an earthbender, of course, but earthbending is forbidden in their village, so he doesn't earthbend often or around people, but eventually there's an old man that's trapped in like this rock slide. Haru frees him, and then eventually the man tells on him to the Fire Nation that he is an earthbender, so they come around and they arrest him, and then Katara wants to free him, but of course the other two mainly Sokka says that, maybe it's not such a good idea to do that because they could get captured themselves. But Katara says that she really wants to help him as well as the people that are of the village that were captured. So she comes up with a plan and does some fake earthbending in front of the people, the Fire Nation soldiers. Basically, Aang uses air to lift up a rock from a vent, and yeah, it just looks like she's earthbending. So she gets captured, and it turns out they're on an island that is just made of like metal, so they can't bend because, of course, metal bending wasn't invented yet. And so they're completely helpless, basically, just out in the middle of the ocean without any metal or any earth to bend. So Katara wants them to get together and free themselves, fight against the Fire Nation soldiers, but they don't want to. So Aang and Sokka help. Aang gets a bunch of coal from the center of the island, or the little platform thing or whatever. He gets that up there, and then Katara convinces them to fight, and they fight and free themselves. So yeah, it's a pretty good episode, So overall, it's a pretty good episode. You get introduced to Haru and his father. I forget his father's name at the moment, but they both appear later. So overall, the episode doesn't really accomplish too much in terms of the story, but it does introduce you to some more characters as well as does some world building. You know, you get to see firsthand what the Fire Nation rule is like over its people that it's captured, as well as you just get an episode where you see just Team Avatar do their thing and rescue some people. Just saving the world one person at a time, or in this case, a few people at a time. Alright, and here we have the next episode is called The Winter Solstice Part 1 and then Part 2. The first part is the Spirit World. This is really the first episode where we get introduced to the Spirit World, and it's really interesting. So Aang and his friends go to this Earth Kingdom village that is being terrorized by this angry spirit, which is named Heibai. And since Aang is the bridge between the spirit world and the human world, or just, the natural world, it is Aang's job to save the village from the spirit. Now, eventually the spirit kidnaps Sokka, and Aang he figures out that the spirit is just mad because the forest was cut down. The forest that is right by the village was cut down. But Aang shows the spirit that the village, or the trees, the village will grow back. Yes, the trees will grow back, and yeah, the spirit is not mad anymore, and then, it just becomes a giant panda, instead of just this really creepy monster guy, it just becomes a panda. And then Aang sees Avatar Roku's dragon, and this shows Aang that he needs to get to this Fire Nation island. I think it's called Crescent Island or something, where there's a Fire Sage temple during the winter solstice, so Avatar Roku can talk to him. So that really sets things in motion for the second episode. Now, during this time, Uncle Iroh gets captured by the Earth Kingdom, and then Zuko helps him escape. That was pretty fun. It's a little side thing to show what the villains are doing right now. So I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, this episode's pretty good. I do admit that the second part is even better. This part is incredibly good. This is where we finally get really introduced to Avatar Roku, as it is called Avatar Roku. Winter Solstice Part 2, Avatar Roku, of course. But, so Aang goes to the island. The Fire Sages attack him because, of course, he is not... he's wanted by the Fire Nation. But one of them helps them, and they go to this room, and they fake a fire blast to make it look like Aang's already in the room. So, they trick the Fire Sages into opening the door, and Aang rushes in to talk to Avatar Roku. And also, I forgot to mention that Admiral Zhao, they have a run-in with Admiral Zhao, who is this other Fire Nation, or at first he's, of course, Commander Zhao, but eventually becomes Admiral. But Zuko has a running into him. He's also looking for the Avatar, and he follows Zuko to the Fire Sage Temple, and he holds Zuko hostage. Zuko tries this smart plan where he has his ship continue on, and Zuko goes through the smoke screen of his ship in this little tiny boat that he has, but Admiral Zhao sees through it, Commander Zhao sees through it, and he follows him there, and he wants to capture the Avatar too. So it gives him a competition, Zuko, which I thought was really good. Admiral Zhao isn't a very long-lived character, he's only in the first book, but I think he's still a pretty darn good character. He's perfect because he wants the same goal as Zuko, but he has more resources and stuff behind him, so that makes him an interesting character. So anyways, Aang goes to talk to Avatar Roku, and he gives him basically what the rest of the series is about and what they're trying to accomplish, which I thought was really well done. It doesn't give you all the answers right away. It kind of eases you in and gives you answers when it wants to, which I thought was really well done. So yes. So this episode is pretty important. It tells Aang, Avatar Roku tells Aang, that Sozin's Comet will come at the end of the summer, and the Fire Lord will use that comet to destroy the Earth Kingdom and rebuild it. So yes. So now Aang has a goal. He has to stop the Fire Lord before the Sozin's Comet comes, and he uses that power. So yes, Avatar Roku combines with Aang and frees, he's surrounded by the Fire Nation outside, but Avatar Roku helps him and they escape. Avatar Roku's temple just gets destroyed, but, they escape, so all is well. I wouldn't say this is the best episode of Book 1, but I would say it is definitely one of the best ones. I'd say probably around top 5, maybe even top 3. It's a very good episode. And alright, so the next one we have is the Waterbending Scroll. This one is pretty fun too. So Aang and Katara and Sokka are in this village. They're trying to get some stuff, get some supplies, and they find this pirate group. And on their boat, they have a Waterbending Scroll. Now, the pirates won't sell it to them, but Katara steals it anyways. The pirates chase after them, and they get away. Zuko then finds the pirates, and they talk about the bald monk kid and the girl, and he figures that it is Aang. and he goes to find them, and they just have a battle, and then of course Aang wins. Aang and Team Avatar wins, and the final battle is really fun. It's just such a great final battle. They're on two boats, and it's just makes for a fun time. But before that, you get a sense of jealousy from Katara. She starts teaching Aang waterbending, and he's really, really good at it. He's like a natural at waterbending. And Katara gets really jealous, but then eventually she comes to her senses and realizes that he is, of course, the Avatar, and he needs to do this, so yeah. But she does continue waterbending. She gets the scroll at night, and she goes out to waterbend, and then Zuko finds her, and she's captured, and then, all this happens, the final battle and whatnot, and yeah. Overall, this episode is pretty great. You finally get to see Aang do some more waterbending. Of course, he does waterbending in the Avatar Returns episode, which is the second episode. But, you get to see him start learning some waterbending. And you also get a little bit of Katara's arc, like she being jealous. And then she realizes, of course, that Aang needs this. And, she comes to her senses. And, yeah. Alright, next we have Jet. Introduces another pretty darn good character. I wouldn't say he's the best character, but I wouldn't say he's the worst character. I think he's a pretty darn good character, and he's a tragic character too. So in the story, they run into this Fire Nation camp, and these rebels save them and take them back to this place in the trees, like this tree fortress. And yeah, it's run by this rebel leader. His name is Jet. He's a very fierce and daring rebel leader, and he's kind of like a Robin Hood character, if you will. He just wants to free the people. And, well, he's not quite Robin Hood, but, you'll see in a second. But Aang and Katara really like him, and Katara really likes him. And then Sokka, has some doubts about him. He doesn't trust him, and, yeah. But eventually Jet tries to win over his trust. They go on a listening mission together, and they find this old man, and Jet attacks him. And Sokka is outraged by this. And he goes back to tell Aang and Katara what happened, but Jet is already there, and he shows them that there is a dagger inside of the old man's satchel. So, with a little spot for poison, like a little canister for poison or whatever. And, that gets Aang and Katara on Jet's side, but Sokka still isn't convinced. So, eventually, Sokka gets captured by the group when he overhears their plan to destroy a dam, which will unleash a huge flood of water on the nearby village, which will kill a lot of people, Fire Nation soldiers, as well as, normal civilians. So Sokka is also outraged by this. He goes back to tell Aang and Katara, but he's captured before then. Jet gets Aang and Katara to help him by overflowing the dam, and then he gets ready to blow it up, and he does, and whoa! Jet just killed a bunch of people, but no, it turns out that Sokka came to the rescue because he actually broke free of the two rebels, I believe, Pipsqueak and Smellerbee. So Sokka saves the day, and Jet is proved to be a bad guy, basically. He's willing to sacrifice the lives of countless civilians just to destroy a few Fire Nation soldiers. So yeah, there you go. Alright, so we're on to what I would say is the worst episode of Season 1, but it's still pretty good. Alright, so I'm just going to go over this one pretty fast. It's called The Great Divide. Now, this episode, basically, they land down in a canyon, and there's these two fighting clans. I don't remember what their names are, but like one's a really cleanly clan, and one's a very dirty clan. And they both, Sokka and Katara, kind of have a split. They're kind of angry at each other at their ways because they're so annoyed with each other. So Katara goes with the cleanly people, and Sokka goes with the dirty people. And they both have the story of how they got into a feud. One side of the story is that the cleanly guy lost his powerful orb, and then it was stolen by that dirty guy. But then, on the dirty guy's side, is that the dirty guy helped get the orb back to the city, the cleanly guy's city, but then he was arrested and thrown in jail for the rest of his life or whatever. So then these canyon crawlers attack them, and they have to come together to fight them off, and yeah, so they do that, and then Aang says that he knows the story of what actually happened. It was just actually a game. It wasn't actually real life or anything. It was just a little game that they were playing, and yeah, it was nothing basically. Their feud was just over a silly little kind of like a soccer game basically. So and then Aang says that he was actually lying. He doesn't know if that's true or not. So that kind of really was weird because it really goes against Aang's character. But it's the one weird little piece of his arc there. It's kind of weird. So yeah, they even skip over this part in in Ember Island Players, which is really funny. But yeah, even the creators didn't really like this episode too much. But for what it is, it was pretty good. Just wasn't the best episode. There's so many other great episodes. But yes, here we have another one of the, I'd say, top 5 episodes. We have The Storm. This one is amazing. This episode basically reveals the backstory finally of what happened with Aang and what happened with Zuko. So they are in this cave. There's a big storm coming up. Sokka goes with this fisherman to get some money because they need some more money for fish and food and supplies and whatever. So while that happens, Katara and Aang are in this cave and they talk about how all this happened. So Aang's side of the story is that he was with the monks in the Southern Air Temple, and they revealed to him that he was the Avatar at only 12 years old. They were supposed to reveal who the Avatar is when they're 16, but there's a lot of tension with the Fire Nation and stuff, and they feared that a war was coming, so they needed the Avatar sooner rather than later. And Aang starts getting treated differently by the elders as well as the children there, the Fire Nation, the Airbender children. And, he starts feeling kind of down and alone, but Monkey Yatsu is still there for him. He's kind of his father figure, since the monks don't really believe in, parenting. They just have, just the monks take care of the children, not like their own separate parents. So, yeah, Monkey Yatsu is his father figure, and they talk about taking him away because they feel that Monkey Yatsu's connection with Aang is too personal and that it will get in the way of his training. So Aang is really upset by this, and he runs away. And that's how he gets frozen in the ice. There's a storm, and he falls down into the water, and then he goes into the Avatar state. He freezes Appa and himself in there, and yeah. So that is pretty interesting. I really like that they did that. They didn't go right away and just gave that. They could have started off the series with that, but no. They had to wait, or they didn't have to wait. They decided to wait until the 12th episode, which I thought was really interesting. You get this. Really just satisfies your taste for wanting to know what's happened and how Aang got there. And then you also have Zuko's story. So these two go coincide side by side. They're in the same episode, which I thought was really good. You get to see both sides. You get to see the good guy and you get to see the bad guy story in the same episode. So the crew asks Iroh what happened with Zuko and why he was banished. So he tells them that he spoke out during his father's war meeting, and his father challenged him to an Agni Kai. He thought it was going to be the general that he insulted by saying his tactic was wrong because the general wanted to sacrifice some people, some of the troops, in order to get the other troops to surprise attack the enemy, which of course Zuko didn't agree with because he's like, how could you sacrifice innocent people like that? They're Fire Nation citizens too. But yes, so he thought the general was going to challenge him, but it was actually his father himself. He couldn't fight his father, and his father gives him the scar that he has, and yes, and he was banished. And he's been on the run, looking for the Avatar for 3 years after that. So he's only 13 when that happened. This is also the first episode we get a brief glimpse of Azula, which I thought was interesting. So yes, this story and this episode is absolutely amazing. Of course, Sokka and the fishermen get into trouble with the sea, and Aang and Katara save them and whatever. But the main part of the story is the backstory, and it is very good. It's like I said before, easily one of the top 5 episodes in my opinion. Speaking of top 5 episodes, we also have the Blue Spirit. This episode is amazing. So Aang gets captured when he is trying to save Sokka and Katara. They have some sort of illness, and Aang has to go and get these frozen frogs for them so they can suck on them and they'll be cured. Aang gets captured by Admiral Zhao. Now he's Admiral, and he takes him to a prison, and he's going to bring him back to the Fire Lord. But the Blue Spirits comes and saves Aang. You get this really awesome action sequence, probably one of the best action sequences in Book 1 and maybe even in all, because there's such an awesome action sequence with the Blue Spirits. It just, so cool. And eventually, the Blue Spirit escapes with the Avatar, with Aang, and he gets injured, and Aang takes him into safety, and he finds out that it's actually Zuko this whole time. Zuko is trying to capture Aang for himself, or just rescue him in general, So it's really interesting. It really shows, the start of, Zuko's kind of good side, you get to see his good side in the storm where he saves this Fire Nation officer that works for him, but this really starts Zuko down a path to redemption, and I thought it was really interesting. This is a great episode. The Blue Spirit is really cool too, and just the episode overall is great. It's really well done. Alright, now in my opinion, this is probably the second worst episode, but it's still really good nonetheless, and that is the Fortune Teller, the gang, as it says in IMDb. The gang gets together and goes to this village where a fortune teller lives who is said to never be wrong. So this episode is pretty fun. Aang and Katara get their fortunes read, and Katara becomes obsessed with her future, so she keeps on going back. But Aang sees that, the fortune teller says there really isn't any love in his future, and he's kind of sad by that because he likes Katara. But yes, so the fortune teller says that the volcano won't erupt. There's a volcano right by their village. They used to go up and check on it every year, or whenever. I don't remember how long it was, but I think like every year. But then they decided that the fortune teller was good enough. She would tell them if the volcano was going to explode, and it turns out she was wrong. Aang goes up to get a flower for Katara because it's revealed that the flower is like an ultimate sign of love or whatever. And Aang sees that she was wrong. The volcano erupts. They save the village, and then this one guy says like, "Oh, she was right. The village didn't get destroyed by the volcano." Of course, that makes Sokka mad. He's like, "I hate you." And yes, just a little, I guess, filler episode, but it's still a good episode nonetheless. It's a funny episode, not super serious, and just makes for a good time. Next up, we have Bato of the Water Tribe. Now, this episode is pretty good too. I do admit it's not as strong as some of the other episodes, but I'd say it's probably on the lower half of the of book 1, but it's still a very good episode nonetheless. So Sokka and Katara meet up with their dad's friend, who is Bato, when he was left behind because he was injured. So he left behind because he didn't want to slow down the pack, their tribe or whatever. So they find him, and he's waiting for a message from his dad, or from their dad, about where he will be next. And then the messenger arrives. Aang gets the message instead of Bato. He's feeling kind of like jealous and down because he doesn't really fit in with Bato, because Sokka and Katara are really connecting with him, of course, because they know him already. And he just feels kind of down. So he goes out of their little huts and stuff, and yeah, he gets the message. And then Bato takes Sokka to dodge icebergs, in this case rocks, because it's a tradition, a rite of passage for a young water tribe male, I guess. I don't think the females don't do it, I don't know. But it's a tradition for a young water tribe male to do it, and Sokka didn't do it yet, so he takes them out. They do it, and then I think he says he gives them all like these roles, titles for how well they did, like and Aang gets like most trustworthy or something, and he reveals that he actually did have their message this whole time, and Sokka and Katara are upset at him, and they leave with Bato to go meet their dad and to go go with their dad again. But then they realize that they have to help Aang do his mission, and they come back and they rescue Aang from Zuko, and so pretty simple, but overall pretty good. So it does reveal like Aang's sort of like jealousy a little bit, like he was jealous of Bato, and like he didn't want him to take Katara and Sokka away from him because he couldn't imagine being on his own because they've been together so long. So yes. So overall, pretty good. Just I feel like not as strong as some of the other episodes. We are getting pretty close to the end. Next up, we have only 5 more episodes. One of them is a 2-parter, so we'll probably talk about that. We'll probably talk about that separately. But okay. Next up, we have another really great episode. I wouldn't say maybe number 6 out of the top 5. That doesn't make any sense. Number 6 in terms of like best to worst, I'd say maybe. This one is The Deserter. Now, Aang and company go to this Fire Nation festival for Aang to get a closer look at firebending, and they kind of run into some trouble, and then this one guy rescues them. He takes him to his leader, and it is Zhang, this guy that was used to be a Fire Nation general, I believe, but then he deserted because he didn't like what was going on. So now Aang wants him to teach him firebending because he figured he could get a jump start on firebending too. But Zhang won't teach him. But then Avatar Roku comes to his rescue, and Zhang is convinced to teach Aang teach Aang firebending. Now Aang gets impatient. Zhang tries to teach him slowly and just get down on the basics first, and discipline. You need discipline to firebend. And then Aang gets impatient, and he tries to firebend, and he accidentally burns Katara, and it really kind of scars him too. Katara is fine. She learns that she's a healer, and that she heals herself, but Aang is kind of scarred from firebending. He doesn't want to firebend ever again. So this is really an important part in Aang's little arc here. He's afraid of firebending, and he doesn't want to learn it. So I thought that was really interesting, So yeah, really good parts of good thing for Aang to have. A fear of firebending. He doesn't want to do it anymore because he feels like it will hurt people as well. So yes, and then Admiral Zhao turns out that he was the pupil that Zhang Zhang was talking about that didn't have any discipline, and it was funny. The final, overall, it's a little bit of a somber episode. It's got some fun to it too, but it's got some like sadness too, with like Aang burning Katara. But the final battle is pretty funny. So Admiral Zhao tries to burn Aang. He doesn't fire a single punch really. Aang doesn't fire too much, but Zhao just keeps on firing and firing, and it turns out at the end he destroys all of his ships. And yeah, so yeah, he really doesn't show any discipline whatsoever in terms of firebending. So yes, and then he tries to capture Zhang Zhang, but he holds him off, and they escape, and Zhang Zhang disappears too, to show up eventually later in the series, thankfully. So that's cool. Zhang Zhang is a pretty small character, but he's still a very cool character. His voice is very cool, and his overall character design is very cool. This episode is, I'd say, pretty important. Alright, so next we have the Northern Air Temple. This episode is interesting too. Aang and his friends hear about these people that were in the Northern Air Temple that were flying around, and he thinks that there are still some airbenders around, so of course they naturally go to check and see if there are. But it turns out there are just people living there that have learned to kind of like glide instead of like just airbend, but they do glide. I said that really weird. I said airbend, but anyways, so Aang is really disappointed, and he's kind of mad that they are taken over his air temple, well, not his air temple, but his people's air temple, and kind of wrecked it with some modern stuff to it. So this is like I said, I think I said before, I don't remember already, but it's kind of like the modern world versus the older world. So it's like Aang is still getting used to the modern world, and he's kind of upset that the older world is being destroyed by the modern world. But then he comes to accept it and realizes that these people need this place, and that this is probably what the monks would want. So he's alright with it. But then he finds out that the mechanist, the person that's running the whole operation there, is actually working for the Fire Nation. They have a fight with the Fire Nation, and they actually win due to the mechanist's invention with this air balloon, as well as some other stuff too. And it really introduces you to the Mechanist, who comes to be an important character later in Book 3, so that's cool. I really like how they use characters again. They don't just throw them away. They use a lot of the characters again, which is great. So, anyways, the ending, though, is incredibly important because the people that were attacking, the Fire Nation people that were attacking, finds the air balloon, yes. And you'll find out what happens to that later. Yes, that was like a really, oh boy moment. Like, it kind of like, felt like such a small thing, but it was actually an incredibly important part. So overall, this episode is interesting. You get to see what the future is like. Well, I guess not like the future, but you get to see what it's like now, how things are being invented, and people living in the air temples now, which is interesting. So yeah, there you go. But yeah, overall, interesting episode. I wouldn't say it is the best either of the season, but I'd still say it is a pretty darn good episode. All right, so now we have the Northern Water Tribe episode. So we've got the Waterbending Master. So Aang and Katara and Sokka finally make it to the the Water Nation, the Northern Water Tribe, and Aang wants to be taught. And Master Pakku is the main guy there that teaches waterbending. So Aang gets in with him, but he's upset to find out that Katara cannot waterbend with him. So, and Katara, of course, is very upset too. So he starts teaching her what he learns during their training lessons that Aang comes to. Master Pakku is upset by this because he finds out, because apparently he's just stalking his students or whatever. And he forbids Aang to teach Katara anymore. Eventually Katara challenges him, and he accepts that she is meant to be a waterbender, not just a healer, because that's what all the women do in the Northern Water Tribe. But she should be a waterbender, so he accepts her as a student. And yeah, this also is the start of Sokka's love interest with Princess Yue. It's really complicated because she is promised to another person, but she really starts falling in love with him, and it just gets really complicated. It spans over the next two parts, the Siege of the North, Part 1 and Part 2. And it's tragic, but also really good. So alright, so here we go. Let's just jump into the Siege of the North. The Waterbending Master was pretty darn good. Pretty solid. I would say it isn't as good as the Siege of the North, but it's still a really good episode nonetheless. I'd say, I don't know where I'd rank it, honestly. Maybe I don't know, maybe top 5, maybe, I don't know. I don't know how many episodes I said that are top 5. I think I've said the Storm, Spirit World part, or not Spirit World part 2, Avatar Roku, the Storm, and then probably Waterbending Master, and then Siege of the North, and then Siege of the North part 2 I'd say is the best out of season 1. And alright, so we have the finale of book 1, and man, they really know how to do finales in the series, you know? I feel like all of the finales are the best episodes of that season. So alright, here we go. So we have the Siege of the North. The North is going because they know that Aang and company are going to the Water Tribe, the Northern Water Tribe, in order to learn waterbending. So they decide to launch an attack with the help of Admiral Zhao. Admiral Zhao leads it, and he also gets the help of General Iroh. And they try to kill off Zuko because they, they know he's going to interfere. So they think that they've killed him, but he's actually hiding in their ship, and he's going to go and get the Avatar. So they the Fire Nation attacks, and Aang tries to defeat them, but it's like really hard because there's like so many ships that it just Aang can't do it by himself. So he goes to the water spirits, the water and moon spirits, to try to get their help. But then he is captured by Zuko while he's in the spirit world, so that's a big problem there. And the moon spirit is killed by Zhao, which he now wants to be called Zhao the Moonslayer or whatever, because he wants to be like this really awesome guy. So he kills the moon spirit, and Princess Yue has to sacrifice herself because it turns out she was really sick when she was born, and she almost died, but the moon spirit gave her life, and now she has to give that life back to save the moon spirit, which is sad for Sokka. He has to say goodbye to her, and she basically dies. I guess she becomes a spirit, so I guess she doesn't technically die, but she basically dies. Her physical self dies. And yeah, it restores the moon spirits. Aang and, not Aang, sorry, Katara and Sokka rescue Zuko and Aang. And Aang combines with the water spirit, or the ocean spirits, once they get back to the Northern Water Tribe, and saves the day. Yes, he becomes like this giant water creature thing, and he destroys the fleets. And then Admiral Zhao and Zuko have a fight, which is really awesome. It's one of the coolest fights of the series as well. It's in black and white, and then it's during when the moon is not there yet. So they have a fight. When the moon spirit isn't back yet. So they have a fight. It's in black and white, and then it's in color when they firebend, which is really cool. And then Admiral Zhao gets defeated. He gets taken to the spirit world, and he's never seen again. Or is he? But yes. So overall, super amazing. I think I got some of that stuff out of order, but I think I got the most of it. So yes, book 1 is really awesome. It does a lot of world building. It's got a lot of good world building. It's got a lot of great episodes. And yeah, overall, just a really great start to the series, but it gets even better from here. Alright, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'll be talking about some more Avatar very soon. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.